miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together, a romance that changes everything. She shouldn't be checking her phone during the morning briefing, but she did. Naomi Ellis sat perfectly straight in the glass conference room on the 32nd floor of Hartwell & Associates, her dark brown eyes scanning the quarterly reports while her manicured fingers subtly turned her wedding ring inward. The simple platinum band caught the Chicago morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but no one could see it from this angle. No one could ever see it. At 30, Naomi possessed the kind of beauty that commanded attention without demanding it. Her skin was the rich color of warm honey, flawless and glowing even under the harsh fluorescent lights. Today, her natural hair was styled in an elegant twist at the nape of her neck, showcasing the graceful curve of her shoulders beneath her tailored navy blazer. She had learned long ago that confidence was her greatest accessory, and she wore it like armor. "Miss Ellis, are you with us?" The sharp voice of Catherine Hale cut through Naomi's thoughts like a blade. The new managing director had arrived 6 months ago with a mission to restructure inefficiencies, which apparently meant making Naomi's life a living hell. Catherine's pale blue eyes held a coldness that made Naomi's colleagues shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Of course, Ms. Hale." Naomi's voice was steady, professional. "I was reviewing the Blackstone account details. The client meeting is scheduled for the Blackstone account that you've been handling so adequately." Catherine's smile was razor thin. "I've decided to reassign it to someone with more strategic vision." Naomi felt the familiar tightness in her chest, but her expression never wavered. Around the table, her colleagues, Donovan from litigation, Celeste from corporate, even old Mr. Whitmore, avoided eye contact. They'd all seen this pattern before. Catherine had a talent for targeting the best performers and slowly chipping away at their confidence. But Naomi wasn't like the others. She had something they didn't, a secret that could change everything in this room with a single phone call. Her phone buzzed against her thigh. A text message. "Missing you already. Dinner at Alinea tonight? A." Despite everything, Naomi's lips curved into the softest smile. Alexander, her husband, her beautiful, brilliant, impossibly wealthy husband who had no idea she was sitting in a conference room being systematically humiliated by a woman who wouldn't last 5 minutes in his boardroom. "Something amusing, Miss Ellis." Catherine's voice could freeze water. Naomi looked up, her smile fading but her strength remaining. "Not at all. I was simply appreciating the morning view." Through the windows, Chicago stretched out like a kingdom, glass towers reaching toward heaven, the lake sparkling in the distance. Somewhere in one of those towers, Alexander was probably reviewing acquisition reports or negotiating million-dollar deals. At 41, he commanded respect with his mere presence, his steel-gray eyes and perfectly tailored suits making grown men reconsider their life choices. And every night he came home to her. Every night, he traced his fingers along her skin and whispered how she was the only real thing in his world of carefully orchestrated business theater. "The view won't pay your bills if you can't keep up with the demands of this position," Catherine continued, her voice carrying across the room like a public execution. "Perhaps it's time to consider if you're truly suited for this level of responsibility." The words hung in the air like smoke. Naomi felt every pair of eyes on her, waiting to see if she would crack, if she would finally show weakness. 6 months of this. 6 months of undermining comments, reassigned accounts, and deliberate exclusions from important meetings. But Naomi Ellis, Naomi Drake, though only one person in the world knew that name, had survived worse than Catherine Hale. "I appreciate your concern," Naomi said, her voice calm as still water. "I'll be sure to exceed your expectations, as always." She gathered her files with practiced grace, her movements fluid and purposeful. As she stood, her phone buzzed again. "P.S. Wear the blue dress, the one from our honeymoon." This time, Naomi couldn't hide her smile completely. It was small, private, but it lit up her entire face for just a moment. The blue dress, silk and flowing, the color of deep ocean water. She'd worn it on their first night in Santorini, when Alexander had carried her to their private terrace and made love to her under a sky full of stars. "Is there something you'd like to share with the class?" Catherine's voice was venomous now. Naomi met her gaze directly. "Just grateful for another beautiful day in Chicago, Ms. Hale. The city has so much to offer when you know how to appreciate it." The subtext was clear, though only Naomi understood its full meaning. This city belonged to her in ways these people couldn't imagine. Every restaurant, every theater, every exclusive club, all of it was hers for the asking. Not because she'd married money, but because she'd married the man who owned half of it. But sitting in this glass box, surrounded by people who saw her as nothing more than an expendable assistant, that world felt like a dream. Catherine's eyes narrowed. "Well, Miss Ellis, let's see how much you appreciate it when real pressure starts. I expect the Blackstone files on my desk by 5, along with a complete analysis of their tax implications." "The Blackstone files that were due next week?" Naomi asked evenly. Did I stutter? Around the table, her colleagues shifted uncomfortably. Even they knew this was unreasonable. The Blackstone account was complex, requiring hours of research and coordination with 3 different departments. Naomi nodded once. "Consider it done." As the meeting dispersed, she walked toward her desk with the same poise she'd maintained for 2 years. But inside, something was shifting. Alexander's messages had reminded her of who she really was, not just Catherine Hale's punching bag, but a woman who was cherished, protected, and loved beyond measure. She sat at her desk and opened the Blackstone file, but her mind wandered to the blue dress hanging in her closet at home. Their home, a penthouse that overlooked the same Chicago skyline she could see from this window, but from a height that made this 32nd floor look like ground level. Her phone rang. Internal line. "Naomi Ellis speaking. Miss Ellis, please come to my office immediately." Catherine's voice was clipped, professional, but Naomi could hear the satisfaction underneath. As she walked toward the managing director's office, Naomi caught her reflection in the glass partitions. Tall, elegant, unbreakable. She looked like exactly what she was. A woman who belonged in boardrooms and corner offices, not fetching coffee and enduring power plays from insecure middle managers. But for 2 years, she'd chosen this life, chosen anonymity over privilege, independence over easy answers. Tonight, she would put on the blue dress. Tonight she would be herself, fully, completely, without hiding. She just didn't know that by tomorrow hiding would no longer be an option. The elevator to the executive floor hummed softly as it carried her upward, and Naomi checked her phone one more time. "Love you, Mrs. Drake, always." Her heart skipped, the way it had every day for 2 years, and in that moment she realized what she had been protecting and what she was about to lose. When love meets pride. Catherine Hale's office smelled like ambition and expensive perfume. Naomi stood in the doorway, watching the managing director shuffle through files with the practiced efficiency of someone who enjoyed having power over others. The corner office was a monument to corporate ego, mahogany desk, leather chairs, and a view of Chicago that was impressive by most standards, but nothing compared to the panorama from Alexander's penthouse. "Close the door, Miss Ellis." Catherine didn't look up from her papers. "We need to discuss your attitude problem." Naomi stepped inside, her heels clicking against the polished floor with measured precision. She'd learned long ago that confidence was a language, and she spoke it fluently. "I wasn't aware I had an attitude problem, Ms. Hale." Catherine finally raised her head, her pale blue eyes assessing. At 45, she was attractive in a sharp, calculated way. Blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon, red lipstick that matched her ruthless ambition. She was the type of woman who'd clawed her way to the top by stepping on anyone who got in her way. "Your performance has been adequate," Catherine said, drawing out the word like a slow poison. "But adequate isn't what Hartwell and Associates demands from its senior staff." Senior staff. Naomi almost smiled. If Catherine only knew that the senior staff title she was so protective of meant nothing to a woman who could buy this entire firm with her household budget. "I've exceeded every target you've set," Naomi replied evenly. "The Blackstone account is ahead of schedule. Client satisfaction is at 96% and yet you seem distracted." Catherine leaned back in her chair, studying Naomi like a predator sizing up prey. "Tell me, Miss Ellis, what exactly is so important that it takes precedence over your job?" The question hung in the air between them. Naomi felt the weight of her wedding ring against her skin, hidden beneath her gloves. In her purse, her phone buzzed softly. Probably Alexander, wondering if she'd received the flowers he'd sent to her apartment that morning. White roses, her favorite, with a note that simply read, "Because you deserve beauty every day of your life." "Nothing takes precedence over my professional responsibilities," Naomi said. "Really?" Catherine's smile was razor-thin. "Because I've noticed some interesting patterns in your behavior. Lunch breaks that run long, phone calls taken in private, a certain detachment from office social events." Naomi's heart began to race, but her expression remained serene. Catherine couldn't possibly know about Alexander. They'd been too careful. too discreet. Their marriage was a secret buried so deep that not even their closest friends knew the truth. "I prefer to maintain professional boundaries," Naomi said. "I wasn't aware that was problematic." "Oh, it's not problematic at all. In fact, I admire your dedication to privacy." Catherine stood, walking around her desk with the slow, deliberate steps of someone enjoying a moment of power. "But I can't help wondering what someone like you might be hiding." The words were a direct challenge. Naomi felt every instinct screaming at her to put this woman in her place, to reveal exactly who she was, and watch Catherine's smug confidence crumble. But she'd made a promise to Alexander, and more importantly, to herself. She would succeed on her own merits, not because of her husband's name. "I'm not hiding anything, Ms. Hale. I simply believe in maintaining professionalism." Catherine stopped directly in front of her, close enough that Naomi could smell her expensive perfume. "You know what I think, Miss Ellis? I think you're biding your time, waiting for something better to come along, and that kind of attitude is toxic to team morale." Naomi's phone buzzed again. This time, Catherine noticed. "Important call?" she asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "I'm sure it can wait." But even as she said it, Naomi's heart was pulling toward the device. Alexander had a board meeting today, the acquisition of a tech startup that could revolutionize their communications division. He'd been nervous about it, which was rare for him. He needed her support, even if it was just a simple text telling him she believed in him. "Answer it," Catherine said suddenly. "I insist. After all, if it's more important than this conversation, it must be urgent." It was a trap. Naomi could see it clearly in Catherine's predatory smile. If she answered, she'd be proving Catherine's point about having divided loyalties. If she didn't, she'd be ignoring Alexander when he might need her. "I'll check it after our meeting," Naomi said. "No, really, I insist." Catherine's voice carried the authority of someone who was used to getting her way. "Unless, of course, you're worried about what I might overhear." The challenge was unmistakable. Naomi reached for her phone, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Alexander's name appeared on the screen, along with a message that made her breath catch. "Just closed the Meridian deal. $2.3 billion. Couldn't have done it without thinking of your smile. Dinner tonight to celebrate? I have something important to tell you." Naomi's heart soared. The Meridian deal had been in negotiation for 8 months. If Alexander had closed it, it would position his company as one of the most powerful tech acquirers on the East Coast, and he wanted to celebrate with her, just her. But sitting in Catherine's office, pretending to be nothing more than an assistant who could be fired at will, the message felt like a cruel reminder of the double life she was living. "Good news?" Catherine asked, though her tone suggested she hoped it wasn't. "Her friend got some positive results on a project they've been working on," Naomi said, slipping her phone back into her purse. "Nothing urgent." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "You know, Miss Ellis, I've been in this business for 20 years. I can spot ambition from a mile away. And I can spot someone who thinks they're too good for their position just as easily." "I don't think I'm too good for anything," Naomi replied. "I simply believe in doing quality work." "Quality work." Catherine repeated the words like they left a bad taste in her mouth. "Tell me something. What do you see yourself doing in 5 years?" The question was designed to expose her. If Naomi admitted to bigger dreams, Catherine would use it as proof that she wasn't committed to her current role. If she claimed to be satisfied with her current position, Catherine would know she was lying. "I see myself continuing to grow professionally and personally," Naomi said carefully, "building meaningful relationships and contributing to something larger than myself." How diplomatically vague. Catherine returned to her desk, settling into her chair like a queen reclaiming her throne. "Let me be more specific. Do you see yourself married? Children, perhaps? A nice suburban house with a white picket fence?" Naomi's heart clenched. Marriage. She was already married, to a man who worshipped her like she was the center of his universe. Children. They'd talked about it in whispered conversations late at night, Alexander's hand resting on her stomach as he painted pictures of little girls with her eyes and little boys with his stubborn determination. "I believe in letting life unfold naturally," Naomi said. "How zen of you." Catherine's smile was getting sharper by the moment. "But here's the thing about life unfolding naturally. It requires honesty. And I don't think you're being entirely honest with me, Miss Ellis." Before Naomi could respond, her phone rang. Not a text this time, an actual call. Alexander's name flashed on the screen, and Naomi felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. She declined the call. Catherine noticed immediately. Important friend, isn't he? She, Naomi corrected quickly. And no, not particularly important. But her phone rang again. Alexander never called twice unless something was wrong. What if the deal had fallen through? What if he needed her? What if... Answer it. Catherine's voice was steel. I insist. In fact, I think it would be beneficial for both of us if you took this call right here, right now. Speakerphone, if you don't mind. Naomi's blood ran cold. That's not necessary. I think it is. Catherine leaned forward, her predator instincts fully engaged. After all, if this person is important enough to call you twice during business hours, they must be important enough to share with your supervisor. The phone rang a third time. Naomi could practically feel Alexander's worry through the device. He was probably thinking she was hurt or sick or in some kind of trouble. In 2 years of marriage, she'd never ignored his calls. Ms. Hale, I really don't think... Answer the call, Miss Ellis. That's an order. And in that moment, Naomi realized that her carefully constructed double life was about to collide with devastating consequences. Her finger hovered over the answer button as her phone rang for the 4th time, and Catherine Hale watched with the satisfied smile of someone who was about to get exactly what she wanted. The call that could change everything is about to begin. Will Naomi protect her secret, or will love make the choice for her? When love calls, hearts answer. Time stopped. Naomi looked at her phone, Alexander's name glowing on the screen like a beacon in the storm of Catherine's calculated cruelty. 4 rings. In 2 years of marriage, she had never let it reach 4 rings when he called. But she also had never been trapped in a glass office with a woman whose sole purpose seemed to be destroying everything Naomi had worked to build. Miss Ellis? Catherine's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. I'm waiting. Naomi's finger hovered over the answer button. One touch, and Alexander's voice would fill this room. Warm, concerned, probably calling her sweetheart or beautiful, the way he did when he was worried. Catherine would hear everything. The tenderness, the intimacy, the unmistakable tone of a man speaking to the woman he loved more than his own life. The phone stopped ringing. Well, Catherine said, settling back in her chair with obvious disappointment. I suppose your friend wasn't as important as they seemed to think they were. But Naomi was already moving. In one fluid motion, she reached for her purse and pulled out a small, elegant business card. She placed it on Catherine's desk with the same grace she'd used to serve tea at a charity luncheon. Actually, Ms. Hale, I believe you've given me exactly what I needed. Naomi's voice was calm, controlled, and carried just enough steel to make Catherine's predatory smile falter. That call was from my attorney. Catherine glanced at the card. Mitchell and Associates, Family Law. Her pale eyes narrowed. Your attorney. I've been documenting the harassment I've experienced in this office for the past 6 months. Naomi's tone was conversational, almost friendly. The reassignment of accounts without cause, the impossible deadlines, the public humiliation during meetings, and now she gestured gracefully toward her phone, demanding that I violate attorney-client privilege by forcing me to take confidential legal calls on speakerphone. The color drained from Catherine's face. I never said anything about attorney-client, didn't you? Naomi tilted her head slightly, her expression innocent. You ordered me to answer a call from my legal counsel on speakerphone in front of my supervisor. I'm quite certain that constitutes a hostile work environment under Illinois employment law. Catherine's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so quickly, she was still processing what had happened. Of course, Naomi continued, her voice as smooth as silk. I'm sure it was simply a misunderstanding. We're all under so much pressure these days, aren't we? Sometimes we say things we don't really mean. The brilliant part of Naomi's lie was that it contained just enough truth to be believable. She did have an attorney, the best family lawyer in Chicago, who'd handled the legal aspects of her marriage to Alexander, and Catherine had indeed ordered her to take the call on speakerphone, which could be construed as harassment if Naomi wanted to pursue it. But the real genius was in what she didn't say. She never claimed the call was actually about legal matters. She simply let Catherine's guilty conscience fill in the blanks. Of course it was a misunderstanding, Catherine stammered, her confidence evaporating like morning mist. I would never intentionally... I'm so glad we cleared that up, Naomi smiled, the expression warm and genuine and absolutely terrifying in its serenity. I'll just let my attorney know that the situation has been resolved amicably. I'm sure she'll be relieved. She was quite concerned about the pattern of behavior I'd been documenting. Catherine's face had gone from pale to ashen. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Back off, or face the consequences of a harassment lawsuit that could destroy her career. Perhaps we should consider this meeting concluded, Naomi said, standing with fluid grace. I have the Blackstone files to prepare, and I'd hate to disappoint you by missing the deadline. Wait, Catherine's voice was sharp with desperation. About those files, maybe the deadline was a bit aggressive. Take until Monday. How considerate of you. Naomi gathered her purse, her movements unhurried and elegant. I'll be sure to mention your flexibility in my notes. The word notes hung in the air like a sword. Catherine understood the implication perfectly. Naomi walked toward the door, then paused, turning back with what appeared to be an afterthought. Oh, and Miss Hale, in the future I'd appreciate if you could schedule our meetings during regular business hours. My attorney bills quite handsomely for after-hours consultations. She left Catherine's office with the same poise she'd entered it, but inside, her heart was racing with adrenaline and something that felt remarkably like victory. The moment she reached her desk, her phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. Sorry for calling so much. Worried when you didn't answer. Are you okay? Naomi's chest tightened with emotion. Even in the middle of the biggest deal of his career, he was thinking about her, worrying about her. She typed back quickly. I'm perfect now. Congratulations on Meridian, I'm so proud of you. Can't wait to celebrate tonight. N. His response came immediately. You're the only celebration I need. I love you, Mrs. Drake. Naomi smiled, the expression transforming her entire face. Around the office, her colleagues went about their business, completely unaware that the woman they saw as just another assistant was exchanging love notes with one of the most powerful men in Chicago. Her phone buzzed again. P.S. I have a surprise for tonight. Something that might change everything for us. Change everything? Naomi's heart skipped. What could possibly change anything about their perfect secret world? Naomi! She looked up to find Donovan from litigation standing beside her desk. He was a decent guy, mid-30s, divorced, the kind of man who brought homemade cookies to office parties and remembered everyone's birthday. I couldn't help but notice you coming out of Catherine's office, he said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Are you okay? You looked a little intense. Naomi appreciated his concern, but she couldn't exactly explain that she'd just outmaneuvered their boss using a combination of legal knowledge, gleaned from her attorney husband, and the kind of confidence that came from knowing she could walk away from this job anytime she wanted. Just discussing project timelines, she said with a smile. You know how passionate Catherine gets about deadlines. Donovan's expression suggested he knew exactly how passionate Catherine could get, and it wasn't pleasant. Well, if you ever need someone to talk to, we all see what's been happening lately, the way she singles you out. For a moment, Naomi was touched by his kindness. In her secret life as Alexander's wife, she was surrounded by people who treated her like royalty. But here, in this glass box of corporate politics, genuine human concern was rare. Thank you, Donovan, that means more than you know. He nodded and returned to his desk, leaving Naomi alone with her thoughts and the lingering adrenaline from her confrontation with Catherine. Her phone buzzed one more time. Also, wear something special tonight. Where we're going, you should look like the queen you are. Naomi's heart fluttered. Alexander was planning something big. She could feel it in every carefully chosen word of his messages, and after the morning she'd had, the promise of his arms around her, his voice whispering how proud he was of her strength, felt like the greatest reward in the world. She gathered her things and headed toward the elevator, her victory over Catherine still singing in her veins. As the doors closed and the elevator began its descent, Naomi caught her reflection in the polished steel. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who couldn't be broken, couldn't be intimidated, and couldn't be contained. Tonight, she would celebrate with the man who loved her for exactly that strength. But first, she had a queen's wardrobe to consider. When love reveals its true power, the black silk dress whispered against Naomi's skin like a secret. She stood before the full-length mirror in their penthouse bedroom, adjusting the delicate straps that showcased her shoulders and the elegant curve of her neck. The dress was new, a gift from Alexander that had appeared in her closet with a note, for the night when everything changes. At the time, she'd thought he was being romantic. Now, after his cryptic messages about surprises and life-changing moments, she wondered if there was more to his words than simple affection. The penthouse around her was a testament to Alexander's exquisite taste and unlimited resources. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago's glittering skyline, while carefully curated art and furniture created an atmosphere of sophisticated comfort. This was her real world, not the glass box of Hartwell and Associates, but this sanctuary where she could be fully herself. Beautiful. Naomi turned to find Alexander standing in the doorway, his steel-grey eyes drinking in the sight of her. At 41, he was devastating in the way that only truly confident men could be. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that was beginning to show distinguished silver at the temples. Tonight, he wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, but it was the way he looked at her that made Naomi's breath catch, like she was the most precious thing in his entire empire. "You're not so bad yourself, Mr. Drake." She moved toward him with fluid grace, her heels clicking against the marble floor. When she reached him, she adjusted his tie, silk, midnight blue, probably handmade in Italy, with the intimate familiarity of a woman who'd been doing it for 2 years. Alexander caught her hands in his, bringing them to his lips to press gentle kisses against her palms. "How was your day, sweetheart?" "Really?" The question carried weight. Alexander had an uncanny ability to read her moods, to sense when something was troubling her, even when she tried to hide it. It was one of the things that made their marriage so extraordinary, his complete attention to her emotional well-being. "Catherine Hale is testing her boundaries," Naomi said simply. "She's trying to assert dominance through intimidation tactics." Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What kind of tactics?" "The usual corporate harassment playbook. Public humiliation, impossible deadlines, attempts to isolate me from colleagues." Naomi smoothed her hands over his lapels, enjoying the solid warmth of his chest beneath the expensive fabric. "Nothing I can't handle. I could make a phone call," he said quietly. "Hartwell and Associates has borrowed significant capital from our investment arm. One conversation about their personnel management practices, and Ms. Hale would find herself updating her resume. The offer was made casually, almost offhandedly, but Naomi knew Alexander well enough to recognize the steel beneath his calm tone. He had the power to destroy Catherine's career with a single phone call, and he would do it without hesitation if Naomi asked him to. "I know you could," she said, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "But I need to handle this myself. I need to know that I can succeed on my own merits, not because my husband owns half of Chicago." Alexander leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. "You are the strongest, most capable woman I've ever known. You don't need to prove that to anyone, least of all to me." "I need to prove it to myself." Naomi kissed him softly, tasting the familiar warmth of his lips. "But I love you for wanting to protect me." "Always," he murmured against her mouth. "It's what husbands do for their wives." The word wives sent a thrill through Naomi's chest. Even after 2 years, there was something magical about being Alexander's wife, about belonging to someone so completely while maintaining her own strength and independence. "Speaking of which," Alexander said, pulling back slightly, "I have something for you." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box that made Naomi's heart skip. "Alexander, not what you're thinking," he said with a smile that was equal parts mysterious and tender. "Open it." Inside the box was a stunning pair of diamond earrings, not the kind of diamonds that screamed wealth, but the kind that whispered it with perfect, understated elegance. Each stone was flawless, probably worth more than most people's houses, but it wasn't their value that took Naomi's breath away. It was what they represented. "They're beautiful," she breathed. "But Alexander, we agreed. We agreed that I wouldn't buy you things that would raise questions at work," he corrected gently. "But tonight, you're not Naomi Ellis, executive assistant. Tonight, you're Naomi Drake, my wife, and my wife deserves to wear diamonds that match her brilliance." He took the earrings from the box and moved behind her, his fingers brushing against her neck as he fastened them in place. In the mirror, Naomi could see their reflection, Alexander's hands gentle and sure, her own face transformed by the elegant jewelry. "There's something else," he said softly, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "Something important we need to discuss tonight." Naomi's heart began to race. "What kind of something?" Alexander's hands settled on her shoulders, warm and reassuring, the kind that might change everything about how we live our lives. "But first, dinner. I want you properly fed and relaxed before we have this conversation." "Alexander," Naomi turned in his arms, searching his face for clues. "You're making me nervous." "Good nervous? Or bad nervous?" His thumb traced along her jawline with infinite tenderness. I don't know yet. She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. But I trust you. That's all I need, he said, kissing her forehead. That's everything. 30 minutes later, they were seated at a private table at Millionaire, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant. The dining room was dimly lit, intimate, filled with the kind of people who moved in Alexander's circles. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities who valued their privacy. But Naomi only had eyes for her husband. Tell me about the Meridian deal, she said, cutting into her perfectly prepared salmon. 2.3 billion is significant. Alexander's smile was genuinely proud. It positions us as the dominant player in communications technology for the next decade. But more than that, it opens doors to possibilities I've been dreaming about for years. What kind of possibilities? The kind that would allow me to step back from day-to-day operations, to focus on the projects that actually matter to me. His grey eyes held hers across the candlelit table, to spend more time with the people who actually matter to me. Naomi's pulse quickened. Alexander, I've been thinking a lot about our arrangement, sweetheart, about the way we've been living. Separate professional lives, secret marriage, carefully compartmentalized worlds. He reached across the table to take her hand. And I've realized something important. What's that? I don't want to hide you anymore. His voice was quiet but filled with absolute conviction. I don't want to pretend that the most important relationship in my life doesn't exist. I want the world to know that I'm married to an extraordinary woman who makes me better in every possible way. Naomi felt her breath catch. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that it's time, Naomi. Time to stop hiding. Time to step into the life we should have been living all along. Alexander's thumb stroked across her knuckles. I want you to quit that job. I want you to work with me, beside me, as my partner in every sense of the word. The words hung between them like a bridge leading to an entirely different future. Naomi felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her, along with the intoxicating possibility of finally living without secrets. And if I say no? She asked quietly. Then we continue exactly as we are, for as long as you want. Alexander's love for her was evident in every word. But I had to ask. I had to offer you the life I think you deserve. Naomi looked around the restaurant, at the elegant couples dining in peaceful luxury, at the world of privilege and power that could be fully hers with a single word. Then she looked back at Alexander, her husband, her anchor, her greatest love, and realized that the most important decision of her life was about to be made. When love means staying strong. I need more time. The words escaped Naomi's lips before she could stop them. Across the candle-lit table, Alexander's expression remained patient, understanding, but she could see the flicker of disappointment he tried to hide. Of course, he said, bringing her hand to his lips, this is a big decision. Take all the time you need. But Naomi could see deeper than his calm exterior. In the 2 years of their marriage, Alexander had opened his world to her completely. His business, his dreams, his vulnerabilities. She knew him well enough to recognize the hope he'd been carrying, the vision of a future where they could finally be public about their love. It's not that I don't want it, she said quickly, her voice soft but firm. Alexander, you have to understand. If I walk away now, if I quit after everything Catherine has put me through, it feels like surrender. Alexander's thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. You wouldn't be surrendering, sweetheart. You'd be choosing us, choosing the life we could have together. I would be choosing the easy path. Naomi met his grey eyes directly, needing him to understand. And I've never been someone who takes the easy path. A smile tugged at the corner of Alexander's mouth. No, you haven't. It's one of the things I love most about you. Catherine Hale thinks she can break me. She thinks that if she pushes hard enough, applies enough pressure, I'll crumble and disappear. Naomi's voice carried quiet steel. I can't prove her wrong by walking away. I have to prove her wrong by staying, by showing her that I'm stronger than whatever game she's playing. Alexander studied her face in the warm glow of the restaurant's lighting. And after you've proven your point, after you've shown her exactly who she's dealing with, then we'll talk about the future. Naomi squeezed his hand. But right now, I need to finish what she started. How long? The question was gentle but direct. Naomi considered. Catherine's behavior was escalating, becoming more desperate and vindictive each week. At this rate, their conflict would reach a breaking point sooner rather than later. A few more weeks, maybe a month. She paused, then added with a slight smile, unless she does something particularly stupid. Alexander laughed, the sound rich and warm in the intimate space between them. Knowing what I know about corporate politics, I'd say the odds of Catherine Hale doing something particularly stupid are quite high. Naomi took a sip of her wine, a vintage that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She's already made several tactical errors. Today, for instance, she tried to force me to take a phone call on speakerphone in front of her. Your call? Alexander's eyes sharpened with interest. Yours, actually. 4 times. Naomi's lips curved into a satisfied smile, but I convinced her it was my attorney discussing harassment documentation. Alexander's laugh was appreciative and proud. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. She backed down immediately, gave me an extension on an impossible deadline, and has been avoiding eye contact ever since. Naomi felt the familiar rush of victory, but it won't last. Women like Catherine don't give up easily. No, they don't. Alexander's expression grew thoughtful. Which means she'll escalate further, push harder. Probably. Naomi's confidence was unwavering. But I can handle whatever she throws at me. Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. For a moment, Naomi thought he was going to make the call that would end Catherine's career, but instead he showed her the screen. Security footage, he explained, from the lobby of your building. I may not be able to interfere directly, but I can certainly keep an eye on things. The footage showed the pristine lobby of Hartwell and Associates, with its marble floors and expensive artwork. Naomi realized that Alexander had been watching over her all along, ensuring her safety even while respecting her independence. You've been monitoring my workplace, she asked, though her tone held no accusation. I've been monitoring potential threats to my wife's well-being, he corrected gently. There's a difference. Naomi felt a rush of warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. And what have your surveillance efforts revealed? That Catherine Hale arrives at work 30 minutes early every morning and stays 45 minutes late every evening. That she has lunch alone at her desk and takes exactly 2 phone calls per day to someone who makes her pace like a caged animal. Alexander's grey eyes held hers. And that my wife handles every challenge with more grace and strength than anyone has a right to expect. You're biased, Naomi said, but her smile was radiant. Completely. Alexander leaned across the table to brush his lips against hers, but also correct. The kiss was soft, gentle, filled with 2 years of absolute devotion. When they separated, Naomi felt centered, grounded in the knowledge that whatever happened at Hartwell and Associates, she had this love, this partnership, this man who would move mountains for her while still respecting her need to climb them herself. I have one condition, Alexander said suddenly. What's that? The moment Catherine crosses a line, and I mean the moment she does anything that makes you feel unsafe or truly threatened, you call me. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Not after you've tried to handle it yourself, not after you've weighed your options. Immediately. Naomi considered this. It was a reasonable request, especially coming from a man who had just agreed to let her continue working in a hostile environment when he could solve the problem with a single phone call. Agreed, she said, but I define what constitutes crossing a line. Fair enough. Alexander signaled for the check. Now let's go home. I want to show you exactly how proud I am of the woman I married. An hour later, they were back in their penthouse. Naomi curled against Alexander's chest on their king-sized bed. The diamond earrings lay on the nightstand, glittering in the soft light from the city below. Alexander's fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, his touch both soothing and possessive. Tell me something, Naomi said, her voice drowsy with contentment. If Catherine does escalate, if things get ugly, will you be able to resist the urge to destroy her? Alexander's hand stilled for a moment. I can resist the urge to act preemptively, he said carefully. But if she hurts you, Naomi, if she truly hurts you, I can't promise I'll be reasonable. Naomi lifted her head to look at him. In the dim light, Alexander's face was all sharp angles and shadows, but his eyes held nothing but love for her. I wouldn't expect you to be, she said softly. That's what makes you mine. Alexander's smile was slow and devastating. I am yours. Completely, irrevocably, eternally yours. As Naomi drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, she had no idea that Catherine Hale was sitting in her own apartment across the city, staring at her laptop screen and planning the kind of escalation that would change everything. Or that within a week, the choice to stay and fight would lead to consequences neither of them could have imagined. But for now, she was simply a woman in love, protected and cherished, gathering strength for the battles yet to come. The decision is made. The trap is set. Now Catherine will make her final devastating move, and Alexander will finally reveal the truth that changes everything. When cruelty reveals its true face. Monday morning arrived with the kind of Chicago rain that felt personal. Naomi stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, watching droplets race down the glass, while Alexander finished his morning routine. The weather matched her mood. Dark, turbulent, electric, with the promise of something significant about to break. "You're thinking too loudly," Alexander's voice came from behind her, warm with affection and concern. She turned to find him adjusting his cufflinks, platinum engraved with their wedding date. Even in the simple act of getting dressed, Alexander commanded attention. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, his silver tie the exact shade of his eyes. At 41, he possessed the kind of magnetic presence that could silence a boardroom or comfort a wife with equal effectiveness. "Just wondering what fresh hell Catherine has planned for today," Naomi said, moving to help him with his tie. It was their morning ritual, this intimate moment of connection before they separated into their different worlds. "Any indication she's planning something specific?" Alexander's hands settled on her waist as she worked, the touch both possessive and protective. "She's been too quiet since our conversation on Friday. Women like Catherine don't retreat. They regroup." Naomi smoothed the silk beneath her palms. "I can feel her plotting." Alexander's jaw tightened slightly. "Remember our agreement. The moment she crosses a line, I call you immediately," Naomi finished, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "I remember." But as she rode the elevator down to street level an hour later, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that Catherine's next move would be different from anything she'd tried before. More personal, more devastating. She just had no idea how right she was. The moment Naomi stepped off the elevator at Hartwell & Associates, she sensed the change. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Colleagues who normally smiled and nodded suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Even Donovan from litigation avoided her eyes as she passed his desk. Something was wrong. Naomi maintained her composure as she walked to her desk, every instinct on high alert. Her computer screen showed 17 new emails, all marked urgent. The first one made her blood run cold. From Catherine Hale, to all staff. Subject: performance review and accountability. Measures effective immediately. All staff members will be subject to enhanced performance monitoring. This includes comprehensive background checks, financial reviews, and personal conduct evaluations. Hartwell & Associates maintains the highest standards of professional integrity, and we will not tolerate any behavior that compromises our reputation. Please report to the main conference room at 9 a.m. for mandatory orientation. Regards, Catherine Hale. Managing Director. Naomi's heart began to race. Background checks, financial reviews. If Catherine dug deep enough, she might find traces of Naomi's real life, the penthouse lease, the credit accounts, the lifestyle that no executive assistant could afford on her salary. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the second email, sent only to her. From Catherine Hale, to Naomi Ellis. Subject: special assignment. Miss Ellis, as part of our new accountability measures, I'm requiring you to present a comprehensive personal financial statement to the board this afternoon. This should include all income sources, assets, and financial obligations. Any discrepancies or unexplained wealth will be investigated thoroughly. Additionally, you'll be presenting the Morrison account analysis to our most important clients. I trust you won't disappoint. Conference room A, 2 p.m. sharp. Catherine Hale. Naomi stared at the screen, her mind racing. Catherine had used the Morrison name again, but there was no Morrison account. That had been her lie from Friday, a fictional client she'd invented to explain the urgent deadline. Now Catherine was calling her bluff, but in the most public, humiliating way possible. If Naomi couldn't produce the Morrison analysis, she'd be exposed as a liar in front of the entire board and their biggest clients. If she tried to explain that the account didn't exist, she'd have to admit to lying about her workload, giving Catherine grounds for immediate termination. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. Her phone buzzed. Alexander. Good morning, beautiful. Thinking of you. A. Naomi's fingers hovered over her phone. She could tell him, one text, one call, and Alexander would make this entire nightmare disappear. Catherine would find herself unemployed and blacklisted before lunch, but that would mean giving up. That would mean letting Catherine win. Instead, she typed back, "Good morning. Having an interesting day already. Love you." And Naomi. She looked up to find Celeste from corporate standing beside her desk, her expression sympathetic but nervous. I just wanted to say, whatever's happening, whatever Catherine is planning, most of us know it's not right. Celeste glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard. You're one of the best people here, everyone knows that. Thank you, Naomi said, genuinely touched. That means more than you know. Is there anything we can do? Collectively, I mean. If enough of us spoke up. No. Naomi's voice was gentle but firm. This is between Catherine and me. I won't let anyone else get caught in the crossfire. Celeste nodded reluctantly and returned to her desk, leaving Naomi alone with her racing thoughts and the growing certainty that Catherine's plan was more sophisticated than she'd initially realized. At 9 a.m., the mandatory meeting began. Catherine stood at the head of the conference room like a general addressing her troops, her blonde hair pulled into its usual severe chignon, her red lipstick a slash of aggression across her pale face. As you all know, Hartwell & Associates has built its reputation on integrity and excellence, she began, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. Unfortunately, recent events have suggested that not everyone in this organization shares those values. Her eyes found Naomi across the room, the look pointed and predatory. Effective immediately, we'll be implementing comprehensive background checks for all staff members, financial disclosures, personal conduct reviews, and accountability measures that ensure everyone here is exactly who they claim to be. Murmurs rippled through the room. This was unprecedented, invasive, and almost certainly designed to target one person in particular. Some of you may find these measures uncomfortable, Catherine continued, her smile sharp as broken glass. Those individuals should ask themselves why transparency makes them nervous. The threat was unmistakable. Naomi felt every pair of eyes in the room shift toward her, some sympathetic, others curious, a few openly hostile from Catherine's inner circle. Furthermore, Catherine said, her voice rising slightly, this afternoon we'll be hosting a presentation for our most valuable clients. Miss Ellis will be demonstrating the comprehensive analysis she's been working on for the Morrison account. Naomi's stomach dropped. Catherine was setting her up for public humiliation in front of clients, colleagues, and the board. When she inevitably failed to produce an analysis for a non-existent account, Catherine would have her firing and her reputation destroyed in one devastating blow. I trust, Catherine said, her pale eyes locking with Naomi's, that everyone will rise to the occasion. The meeting dispersed in uncomfortable silence. Naomi returned to her desk on shaking legs, her mind racing through possible solutions. She could confess to the Morrison lie and hope for mercy. She could produce a fake analysis and hope Catherine didn't have documentation proving the account didn't exist. She could walk away right now and preserve what dignity she had left. Or she could call Alexander and end this nightmare with a single conversation. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her husband. Board meeting running long. Thinking about dinner tonight. Somewhere special to celebrate surviving Monday. The irony was devastating. Alexander was planning to celebrate her surviving Monday, while Catherine was orchestrating her professional destruction. Naomi looked around the office, at colleagues who avoided her eyes, at the conference room where she'd be humiliated in 5 hours, at the glass walls that felt more like a prison with each passing minute. For the first time since this ordeal began, she wondered if her pride was worth the price she was about to pay. But even as the doubt crept in, she straightened her shoulders and opened a new document on her computer. If Catherine wanted a Morrison account analysis, she'd get one. And it would be brilliant. When brilliance meets betrayal, 3 hours until execution. Naomi sat at her desk, fingers flying across the keyboard, with the precision of a concert pianist performing her final masterpiece. Around her, the office hummed with the usual Monday energy, but she existed in a bubble of absolute focus, crafting the most comprehensive business analysis she'd ever created. If Catherine wanted the Morrison account analysis, she would get it. And it would be so meticulously researched, so brilliantly structured, so undeniably professional, that no one in that conference room would question its authenticity. The fictional Morrison Group had become Naomi's greatest creation, a mid-sized telecommunications company based in Denver, with 3 subsidiary offices and a projected quarterly growth of 12%. She'd built their financial history, market positioning, competitive advantages, and potential risks with the skill of someone who'd spent 2 years watching Alexander dissect real companies with surgical precision. Working hard on something special? Naomi looked up to find Catherine standing beside her desk, that predatory smile firmly in place. Today, Catherine wore a black power suit that made her look like a vulture circling wounded prey. "The Morrison analysis," Naomi replied smoothly, not missing a beat. "I think you'll find it comprehensive." Catherine's pale eyes flicked to the computer screen, where charts and graphs painted the picture of a thriving company. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across her face, the first crack in her confidence that Naomi had ever seen. "How thorough of you," Catherine said carefully. "I'm sure our clients will be very interested in your findings." "I'm confident they will be." Naomi saved her document and turned to face Catherine directly. "Was there something else you needed?" Catherine's smile tightened. "Actually, yes. I've been reviewing your employment file, and I noticed some discrepancies that I'd like to discuss privately." Naomi's heart began to race, but her expression remained perfectly calm. "What kind of discrepancies?" "The kind better discussed in my office. Now." As Naomi followed Catherine across the office floor, she caught sight of Donovan watching them with obvious concern. Celeste shot her an encouraging smile from behind her computer screen. Even old Mr. Whitmore looked up from his legal briefs with sympathy in his weathered eyes. They all knew what was happening. They all knew Catherine was orchestrating something cruel and unnecessary, but they also knew there was nothing they could do to stop it. Catherine's office felt like a tomb when the door closed behind them. "Sit," Catherine commanded, settling behind her desk like a judge preparing to deliver a death sentence. Naomi remained standing. "I prefer to stand. I wasn't asking." Catherine's voice carried the sharp edge of someone whose authority had been questioned once too often. "And I wasn't asking for your permission." Naomi's tone was perfectly polite, but the steel beneath was unmistakable. "You said you had questions about my employment file. Ask them." Catherine's nostrils flared slightly. She opened a manila folder and spread its contents across her desk with theatrical precision. "Your application listed previous employment at a small consulting firm in Minneapolis. I called them this morning." Naomi's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. The consulting firm was real. She'd worked there briefly before meeting Alexander. But she'd left under complicated circumstances that she'd rather not revisit. "They had very interesting things to say about your sudden departure," Catherine continued. "Something about a conflict of interest involving a client relationship." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Naomi felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the same suffocating sensation she'd experienced 3 years ago when her professional world had nearly collapsed. "There was no conflict of interest," Naomi said quietly. "There was a false accusation made by a client who didn't appreciate having his advances rejected." "Ah!" Catherine's smile was razor-sharp. "So, you admit there was a situation involving inappropriate client contact." "I admit that a married partner tried to coerce me into a relationship, and when I refused, he filed a complaint claiming I was the one who initiated inappropriate contact." Naomi's voice was steady, but memories she'd buried were clawing their way to the surface. "The firm investigated and cleared me of any wrongdoing, but the damage to my reputation was done." "Cleared of wrongdoing," Catherine repeated, as if the words tasted bitter. "Yet you left shortly after." "I left because working in an environment where my integrity was constantly questioned became untenable." Naomi lifted her chin. "Much like working here." Catherine's eyes glittered with satisfaction. "So you have a pattern of creating uncomfortable situations with male authority figures." "I have a pattern of refusing to tolerate harassment and abuse." Naomi's voice carried quiet steel, which some people interpret as threatening. Threatening indeed. Catherine leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying herself. "Tell me, Miss Ellis, do you think our clients this afternoon will find your history as interesting as I do?" The threat was crystal clear. Catherine intended to destroy Naomi's credibility by bringing up a painful chapter from her past, taking a situation where she'd been the victim and twisting it into evidence of misconduct. "My employment history has no bearing on my ability to perform my current job," Naomi said. "Doesn't it?" Catherine's smile was positively feral now. "Character matters in this business, Miss Ellis. Trust matters. And I'm not sure our clients will trust someone with such a colorful, professional background." Naomi felt the walls closing in. Catherine had found the one weapon that could actually wound her. Not professional incompetence, which could be disproven, but moral character, which was much harder to defend against once the seeds of doubt were planted. Her phone buzzed in her purse. Alexander, probably wondering how her day was going, completely unaware that his wife was being systematically destroyed by a woman who wouldn't last 5 minutes under his withering gaze. "I see," Naomi said finally. "So this afternoon's presentation isn't really about the Morrison analysis. It's about publicly humiliating me using out-of-context information from a previous job." "This afternoon's presentation is about accountability," Catherine corrected smoothly. "About ensuring that everyone in this organization meets our standards of professional excellence. And if I refuse to participate?" Catherine's laugh was genuinely delighted. "Oh, you won't refuse. Because if you don't show up, I'll be forced to explain to our clients that our senior assistant was too unprofessional to complete a simple presentation, and then I'll have to discuss why someone with your background was hired in the first place." It was masterfully done. Catherine had created a scenario where Naomi's only choices were public humiliation or public humiliation. Either way, her reputation would be destroyed and her career would be over. "You're very good at this," Naomi said quietly. "Psychological manipulation, character assassination, corporate warfare, very impressive." "Thank you." Catherine accepted the compliment as if it were genuine praise. "I've had years of practice dealing with people who think they're cleverer than they actually are." Naomi walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline that had become so familiar over the past 2 years. Somewhere in one of those gleaming towers, Alexander was probably in a meeting, making decisions that affected thousands of people, completely unaware that the woman he loved was being dissected by a predator. She could call him. Right now, one phone call, and Catherine Hale would cease to exist as a professional entity. Alexander would ensure that she never worked in this industry again, never worked anywhere again. The thought was almost intoxicating in its simplicity. But that would mean surrendering. That would mean admitting that she couldn't fight her own battles, couldn't protect herself from someone like Catherine. "I'll be there," Naomi said, turning back to face her tormentor. 2 o'clock, Conference Room A, Morrison analysis, complete with supporting documentation. Catherine's smile faltered slightly. "You seem very confident for someone whose career is about to end." "Do I?" Naomi gathered her purse, her movements graceful and unhurried. "I suppose we'll find out this afternoon whether confidence is justified or misplaced." She left Catherine's office with her head held high, but inside, her heart was racing with the knowledge that in less than 2 hours, everything she'd built would be put to the ultimate test. Behind her, Catherine picked up her phone and dialed a familiar number. "It's me," she said quietly. "Everything is proceeding according to plan. By 3 o'clock today, Naomi Ellis will be professionally destroyed and personally humiliated. Yes, I understand the timeline is crucial. Don't worry. After today, she'll never be a problem for anyone again." She hung up, staring out her window with the satisfaction of a hunter who had finally cornered her prey. What Catherine didn't know was that some prey, when cornered, don't just fight back. They call for backup that could level entire city blocks. The trap is perfected, the ammunition is loaded, and the execution is set. But Naomi still has one card left to play, if she's willing to use it. When queens face their executioners, Conference Room A had never felt so much like a gladiatorial arena. Naomi stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, her presentation materials spread before her like battle plans. The room was packed beyond capacity. The entire board of directors, Hartwell's most important clients, senior staff, and what felt like half the office crowding near the glass walls to witness whatever spectacle Catherine had orchestrated. At exactly 2 p.m., Catherine made her entrance. She swept into the room wearing victory like expensive perfume, her black suit perfectly tailored, her blonde hair arranged in its signature severe chignon. Behind her walked 3 men in equally expensive suits, clients whose business could make or break careers with a single phone call. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone savoring their moment of triumph. "Thank you for joining us today. As you know, Hartwell & Associates prides itself on transparency, accountability, and the highest standards of professional excellence." Her pale eyes found Naomi across the room, and her smile sharpened to a razor's edge. "Today we'll be examining those standards through the lens of actual performance. Miss Ellis will be presenting her comprehensive analysis of the Morrison Group account, a presentation that will demonstrate either her competence or her complete unsuitability for this organization." Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. Everyone could feel the electricity in the air, the promise of professional blood about to be spilled. Naomi stood perfectly still, her hands steady on the presentation remote, She wore a navy blazer that brought out the rich honey tones of her skin, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo that showcased the graceful line of her neck. To the casual observer, she appeared calm, confident, completely in control. Only she could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. "Miss Ellis," Catherine said, her voice dripping with false courtesy. "The floor is yours." Naomi stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor with measured precision. She looked out at the sea of faces, some sympathetic, others curious, a few openly hostile from Catherine's inner circle. "Thank you, Ms. Hale." Naomi's voice was clear, professional, betraying nothing of the storm raging inside her chest. "Today I'll be presenting a comprehensive market analysis of the Morrison Group, their current positioning, growth potential, and strategic recommendations for partnership opportunities." She clicked the remote. The first slide appeared on the wall-mounted screen, a sleek corporate logo for Morrison Group, complete with tagline and corporate address in Denver. Catherine's confident expression flickered slightly. The presentation looked professional, polished, completely legitimate. Naomi began to speak, her voice gaining strength with each word. She walked them through market demographics, competitive analysis, financial projections, all meticulously researched, brilliantly structured, absolutely convincing. For 20 minutes, she held the room captivated. Charts and graphs painted the picture of a thriving telecommunications company with enormous potential for growth. Client testimonials praised Morrison Group's innovative approach to market penetration. Financial data suggested a partnership could yield significant returns within 18 months. It was, by any measure, a masterful presentation. As Naomi concluded her analysis and opened the floor for questions, she caught sight of Catherine's face. The managing director looked genuinely confused, almost panicked. This wasn't going according to plan. "Impressive work, Miss Ellis," said Richard Hartwell himself, the firm's founding partner. "Morrison Group sounds like exactly the kind of strategic partner we've been seeking." "Indeed," agreed another client. "I'd like to schedule a preliminary meeting with their leadership team. Can you arrange that?" Naomi felt the floor shift beneath her feet. In her determination to create a flawless presentation, she'd forgotten one crucial detail. People would want to actually meet with the company she'd so brilliantly described, the company that didn't exist. Catherine's smile returned, sharper than ever. She'd been waiting for this moment. "Actually," Catherine said, her voice cutting through the positive chatter like a blade, "before we move forward with any partnership discussions, I think our clients deserve to know the full story about Miss Ellis's creative approach to this analysis." The room fell silent. Naomi felt every pair of eyes turned toward her, watching, waiting. "You see," Catherine continued, rising from her chair with theatrical precision, "the Morrison Group is a fascinating company. So fascinating, in fact, that it exists only in Miss Ellis's imagination." Gasps rippled through the room. Naomi felt the blood drain from her face as Catherine continued her execution. "There is no Morrison Group, no Denver headquarters, no telecommunications company. Miss Ellis has spent the last 4 hours creating an elaborate fiction to cover up her complete failure to complete an actual assignment." The silence that followed was deafening. Naomi could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of dozens of stares pressing down on her like physical force. "Furthermore," Catherine said, clearly savoring every word, "this isn't the first time Miss Ellis has demonstrated questionable professional judgment. Perhaps our clients would be interested to hear about her previous employment history." "Ms. Hale," Naomi said, her voice steady despite the devastation crashing over her. "I don't think—" "Miss Ellis was terminated from her previous position due to allegations of inappropriate conduct with a client," Catherine announced to the room. "While the specific details were covered up, the pattern of behavior speaks for itself." The lie was masterfully crafted. Catherine had taken Naomi's painful history, being harassed and then falsely accused, and twisted it into evidence of misconduct. "That's not true," Naomi said, but her voice sounded weak, even to her own ears. "Isn't it?" Catherine pulled out a file folder. "I have documentation from your previous employer discussing your problematic behavior and sudden departure." Naomi felt the room turning against her. Whispers started among the clients. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even Donovan, who had shown her kindness, was staring at her with shock and disappointment. "So you see," Catherine concluded triumphantly, "we're dealing with someone who not only fabricates client accounts, but also has a history of inappropriate professional relationships. I think the question isn't whether Miss Ellis should be terminated, it's whether her behavior warrants legal action. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Naomi stood frozen at the head of the table, watching her career, her reputation, her carefully constructed professional life crumble to dust. She had lost, completely, devastatingly, publicly. Catherine had won. And then the conference room door opened. The conversation stopped mid-sentence. The whispers died instantly. Even Catherine's triumphant smile faltered as every head in the room turned toward the entrance. Alexander Drake stepped into the room like a force of nature, contained in a perfectly tailored suit. At 41, he commanded attention without seeking it, possessed authority without wielding it aggressively. His steel-gray eyes swept the room with the calm assessment of someone accustomed to walking into boardrooms where billions of dollars hung in the balance. But today, those eyes held something different. Today, they held the cold fury of a man whose wife had been humiliated. "I apologize for the interruption," Alexander said, his voice carrying easily across the stunned silence. "My security team informed me there was some confusion about Miss Ellis's qualifications that required my immediate attention." Catherine's face had gone completely white. She recognized him, of course. Everyone in Chicago's business community knew Alexander Drake by sight. "Mr. Drake," Richard Hartwell stammered, rising from his chair, "what an unexpected honor. I wasn't aware you had business with our firm." "Oh, but I do," Alexander replied, walking slowly toward the head of the room where Naomi stood. "Very important business, as it turns out." He stopped beside Naomi, his presence solid and reassuring. When he looked at her, his expression softened with infinite tenderness. "Hello, sweetheart," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "I'm sorry I'm late." Then he turned back to the room, and his voice carried the authority of empires when he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce my wife." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through every person in the room. "Naomi Ellis Drake," Alexander continued, his hand settling protectively on the small of Naomi's back. "The most competent, intelligent, and capable woman I've ever had the privilege of knowing." Catherine made a small, strangled sound. "And if anyone in this room has a problem with my wife's qualifications," Alexander said, his grey eyes sweeping the assembly with predatory calm, "I suggest you take it up with me. The king has entered the battlefield. The queen has been defended. Now Catherine will learn what it means to attack Alexander Drake's family. When gods defend their queens." The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Alexander's words, "Allow me to introduce my wife," hung in the air like a thunderclap that continued to reverberate through every corner of Conference Room A. 50 pairs of eyes darted between Naomi and the most powerful man in Chicago's business community, trying to process an impossibility that had just become reality. Catherine Hale looked like she was witnessing her own execution. "I'm sorry," Richard Hartwell said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did you say your wife?" "I did." Alexander's arm curved around Naomi's waist with casual possessiveness, a gesture so natural it spoke of years of practice. "Naomi and I have been married for 2 years. We chose to keep our relationship private for obvious reasons. My wife values her independence and didn't want her professional achievements overshadowed by our personal connection." He looked directly at Catherine, and his smile could have frozen blood. "Unfortunately, it seems that privacy has been mistaken for vulnerability by those who should have known better." Catherine's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The predator had suddenly discovered she'd been stalking a lioness under the protection of the apex predator. 2 years? Donovan from litigation spoke up, his voice filled with awe. "You mean all this time? Naomi, you've been Mrs. Alexander Drake," Alexander finished smoothly, "though she's chosen to use her maiden name professionally. A choice I support completely." Around the room, pieces were clicking into place. Naomi's poise under pressure, her refusal to be intimidated by Catherine's psychological warfare, the quiet confidence that seemed to come from some unshakable foundation. It all made sense now. "Ms. Hale," Alexander continued, his voice carrying the deadly calm of someone who had built empires and destroyed enemies with equal ease. "I believe you have something to say to my wife." Catherine stood frozen, her face cycling through shades of panic. She'd spent months systematically attacking the wife of the most dangerous man in Chicago. The professional suicide wasn't just complete, it was spectacular. There must be some misunderstanding," Catherine stammered. "Oh, "There's no misunderstanding," Alexander replied, his grey eyes never leaving her face. "I've been monitoring the situation here for quite some time. Security footage, email records, witness statements. I have a very complete picture of your management style. Ms. Hale." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a tablet, tapping it once before turning it toward the room. The screen showed a compilation of security footage, Catherine's public humiliation of Naomi during meetings, her aggressive confrontations, her deliberate isolation tactics. "What you've witnessed today isn't an anomaly," Alexander said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "It's the culmination of a 6-month campaign of workplace harassment directed at my wife by someone who fundamentally misunderstood the balance of power in this situation." Catherine's legs seemed to give out. She sank into her chair, all her predatory confidence evaporated. "Furthermore," Alexander continued, "the presentation you just witnessed, the one Ms. Hale claimed was fabricated, was actually a test. The Morrison Group analysis was based on detailed market research I provided to my wife last night. Every data point, every projection, every financial model was accurate and actionable." He clicked to another screen, showing the real Morrison Group's corporate information. Morrison Group is a subsidiary of Drake Industries. We acquired them 3 months ago specifically to test whether this firm was capable of handling complex telecommunications partnerships. His smile was razor-sharp. "Ms. Hale's reaction tells me everything I need to know about Hartwell's due diligence processes." The room erupted in stunned whispers. Catherine had just publicly destroyed her own career by attacking a presentation that was not only legitimate, but was actually a test of the firm's competency. "As for the allegations regarding my wife's previous employment," Alexander's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting, "those records are sealed due to the criminal harassment charges filed against her former supervisor. Mrs. Drake, was the victim in that situation, not the perpetrator." He advanced on Catherine like a predator closing in for the kill. "Which means you've just committed slander in front of 40 witnesses, including 3 of my personal attorneys, who happened to be in the building today." Catherine's face had gone beyond pale to a sickly grey. "Mr. Drake, I didn't know. If I had realized—" "You didn't know," Alexander repeated softly. "You spent 6 months systematically harassing an employee without bothering to verify who you were actually dealing with. That level of incompetence would be laughable if it weren't so professionally devastating." He turned to address the room, his voice resuming its normal, commanding tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I came here today because my wife, despite having the resources to end this harassment with a single phone call, chose to handle this situation with her own strength and competence. She wanted to prove that she could succeed on her own merits." Alexander's hand found Naomi's, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "And she did. The Morrison analysis you witnessed was brilliant, comprehensive, and exactly the kind of strategic thinking that built my company into what it is today. My wife doesn't need my name or my money to be exceptional. She simply is exceptional." Naomi felt tears prick at her eyes, not from humiliation now, but from pride and overwhelming love for the man who understood her so completely. "However," Alexander continued, his voice hardening again, "attacking my wife because you failed to recognize her value is something I take very personally." He turned back to Catherine, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Ms. Hale, effective immediately, Drake Industries will be initiating the termination process for our investment partnership with Hartwell and Associates. Given the contractual notice periods, this will significantly impact approximately 40% of this firm's current capital base over the next 6 months." Gasps echoed around the room. Richard Hartwell looked like he might faint. "Furthermore, I'll be recommending to my business associates that they reconsider any professional relationships with organizations that employ individuals of your caliber. I believe the phrase is reputation risk management." Catherine made a small broken sound. In less than 5 minutes, Alexander had damaged her career so severely that finding another position of similar responsibility would be nearly impossible. "But most importantly," Alexander said, his voice gentle now as he turned back to Naomi, "I want everyone in this room to understand something clearly." He lifted their joined hands, displaying the platinum wedding band that had been hidden for so long. "This woman is not just my wife. She's my partner, my equal, and the most valuable asset in my entire empire. She chose to work here, chose to prove herself here because she has integrity and strength that most people can't even comprehend." His grey eyes swept the room one final time. Anyone who chooses to treat her with anything less than the respect she deserves will answer to me. And trust me, that's a conversation you don't want to have." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Catherine's quiet sobbing. Alexander turned to Naomi, his expression transforming from corporate predator to devoted husband in an instant. "Are you ready to come home, sweetheart?" he asked softly. "I think you've proven your point." Naomi looked around the room one last time, at colleagues who were staring at her with new respect, at clients who were clearly re-evaluating everything they'd witnessed, at Catherine, who was crying into her hands at the magnitude of her mistake. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I'm ready." Alexander helped her gather her materials, his movements protective and gentle. As they walked toward the door, the room remained frozen in stunned silence. Just before they reached the exit, Naomi turned back. "Oh, and Miss Hale," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had just reclaimed her power. "The next time you try to destroy someone's career, you might want to make sure they're not married to someone who could buy this entire building with pocket change." And with that, Naomi Ellis Drake walked out of Hartwell & Associates forever, her hand in her husband's, her head held high. Behind them, Catherine Hale's career lay in ashes, and everyone else scrambled to understand how badly they'd misjudged the woman they thought they knew. The Queen has been vindicated, the enemy has been vanquished, and love has triumphed over cruelty. But the best is yet to come, when love conquers all. 6 months later, Naomi stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Drake Industries executive suite, watching Chicago spread out below her like a kingdom reclaimed. The office, her office, occupied the entire 42nd floor of the city's most prestigious business tower. Glass, steel, and marble created an environment of sophisticated power, but it was the family photo on her mahogany desk that made the space truly hers. Alexander's arms around her waist on their second honeymoon in Tuscany, both of them laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear. "Mrs. Drake," her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 3 o'clock is here. Send them in, please." Naomi turned as the office door opened to reveal 3 executives from Morrison Group, the very real telecommunications company that had become Drake Industries' most profitable acquisition. The irony wasn't lost on her. Catherine Hale's attempt to humiliate her with a fictional presentation had led to one of the most successful business partnerships in Alexander's portfolio. "Gentlemen," Naomi said, moving to greet them with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. "Thank you for coming." At 30, she'd grown into her power like a queen accepting her birthright. Her natural hair fell in elegant waves past her shoulders, and her burgundy silk dress was tailored to perfection, expensive, but not ostentatious, powerful, but undeniably feminine. The diamond wedding set on her left hand caught the afternoon light, no longer hidden but worn with pride. "Mrs. Drake," the lead executive said with genuine respect, "the quarterly numbers you projected were conservative. Morrison Group exceeded targets by 15%. Excellent." Naomi gestured toward the conference area of her office, where leather chairs surrounded a table that had hosted billion-dollar negotiations. "Let's discuss expansion strategies for Q4. As they settled into the meeting, Naomi caught sight of Alexander through the glass partition that separated their offices. He was on a conference call, his steel-gray eyes focused with the intensity that had built an empire. At 41, he remained devastatingly handsome, but it was the way he looked at her, with pride, love, and absolute devotion, that still made her heart race. Their offices were connected by a private corridor, a design choice that had raised eyebrows among the architectural team until Alexander explained that his wife was his closest business partner. Now, 6 months into their public marriage, the Chicago business community had learned to fear the combined intelligence of Alexander and Naomi Drake almost as much as they respected it. "Mrs. Drake," one of the Morrison executives was studying her with curiosity. "If you don't mind me asking, how did you transition from executive assistant to chief strategy officer so quickly?" Naomi's smile was enigmatic. "I've always been capable of this level of responsibility. I simply needed the right opportunity to demonstrate it." What she didn't mention was that Alexander had offered her any position she wanted in his company, from chief operating officer to full partner. She'd chosen chief strategy officer because it allowed her to shape the future of Drake Industries while maintaining her own professional identity. The meeting concluded successfully, with Morrison Group committing to a 3-year expansion partnership worth 8 figures. As her clients left, Naomi felt the familiar satisfaction of a negotiation well handled. Impressive as always. She turned to find Alexander leaning against the doorframe connecting their offices, his tie loosened and his jacket abandoned somewhere in his own corporate kingdom. Even disheveled, he commanded attention with the ease of someone born to lead. "How long were you watching?" Naomi asked, moving toward him with fluid grace. "Long enough to fall in love with you all over again." Alexander's arms circled her waist as she reached him. "Watching you work is better than any addiction." "Careful, Mr. Drake. Your employees might think you're unprofessional." But Naomi's smile was radiant as she adjusted his tie, a gesture that had become their ritual. "My employees think I'm the luckiest man alive," Alexander corrected, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. "They're right." Through the glass walls, the Drake Industries staff went about their business with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. But Naomi noticed the way they looked at her and Alexander, not with the awkwardness she'd feared, but with genuine affection for a couple whose partnership strengthened everything around them. "How did the Hartwell meeting go?" Naomi asked, though she already knew from Alexander's expression. "Richard Hartwell officially filed for bankruptcy this morning." Alexander's voice held no satisfaction, only the neutral tone of someone stating facts. Losing our partnership was apparently the final nail. Naomi felt a flutter of sympathy for the older man who'd built Hartwell and Associates from nothing, only to watch it collapse because he'd failed to control Catherine Hale's destructive behavior. "And Catherine?" she asked quietly. "Working as a junior associate at a small firm in Milwaukee. Her reputation preceded her. No major company in Chicago would even interview her." Alexander studied Naomi's face. "Do you regret how it ended?" Naomi considered the question seriously. Catherine's fall had been swift and absolute. Professional exile, financial ruin, and industry blacklisting. It was exactly the kind of comprehensive destruction that happened when someone made the mistake of attacking Alexander Drake's family. "No," she said finally. "She made her choices. She targeted me because she thought I was vulnerable and alone. She learned otherwise." "You were never alone," Alexander said softly. "Even when you thought you were fighting by yourself, I was always there." "I know." Naomi reached up to cup his face in her hands. "That's what made me brave enough to stay and fight." Alexander's phone chimed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled mysteriously. "What?" Naomi asked, recognizing that particular expression. Nothing urgent. But his grey eyes held the same mischievous glint they'd carried the night he'd proposed. "Just confirming some details for tonight." "Tonight? Did you forget? We're having dinner at Alinea. 6 months since I publicly claimed the most beautiful woman in Chicago as my wife." Naomi's heart skipped. She hadn't forgotten. How could she forget the night that had changed everything? But Alexander's tone suggested he had something special planned. "Should I wear the blue dress?" she asked, remembering their private code. "Actually," Alexander said, his voice dropping to the intimate register he used when they were completely alone, "I was thinking something new, something wedding appropriate." Naomi's breath caught. "Alexander, marry me again," he said suddenly, his voice urgent with emotion. "In front of everyone this time. Your family, my family, our friends. I want to stand in front of the world and promise to love you for the rest of my life." Tears pricked at Naomi's eyes. Their first wedding had been beautiful but secret, a private ceremony in Alexander's penthouse, with only a judge and 2 witnesses. This time he wanted to celebrate their love without hiding, without secrets. "We're already married," she whispered. "Then marry me better." Alexander's hands framed her face with infinite tenderness. "Marry me like the queen you've always been. Let me give you the wedding you deserve." Through the office windows, Chicago glittered in the afternoon sun, a city that had witnessed their secret love story, their public vindication, and now their complete triumph. Somewhere in those gleaming towers, people were probably still talking about the day Alexander Drake had walked into a corporate boardroom and claimed his wife in front of the world. "Yes," Naomi breathed, love overwhelming every other emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you again." Alexander's smile could have powered the entire building. He spun her around in the middle of their shared corporate kingdom, both of them laughing with the joy of people who had fought for their love and won. "I love you, Naomi Ellis Drake," he said when he set her down. "I love your strength, your intelligence, your courage. I love that you chose to fight for yourself, even when you could have let me fight for you." "I love you too, Alexander Drake," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I love that you protected me without weakening me. I love that you saw my value before I fully believed in it myself." As evening settled over Chicago, Naomi and Alexander Drake stood together in their empire of glass and steel, planning a wedding that would celebrate not just their love, but their partnership, their equality, and their absolute devotion to each other. Catherine Hale's cruelty had been designed to break Naomi's spirit. Instead, it had revealed her true strength. And in the end, love had not just conquered all, it had claimed its rightful throne. The queen has her crown, the king has his partner, and their empire stretches as far as love can reach. But their greatest adventure is just beginning. 2 years later, the gardens of the Drake estate in Lake Forest were transformed into something from a fairy tale. White roses climbed marble columns wrapped in Italian silk. Crystal chandeliers hung from ancient oak trees, casting rainbow prisms across perfectly manicured lawns. A string quartet played softly as 300 guests, Chicago's most influential families, business leaders, celebrities, and politicians, gathered to witness something extraordinary. The second wedding of Alexander and Naomi Drake. But if anyone had expected a typical society ceremony, they would have been disappointed. This celebration was pure love, designed not to impress but to honor the journey that had brought them here. Naomi stood in the bridal suite of the estate's main house, her reflection multiplied in antique mirrors that had witnessed generations of Drake family moments. At 32, she possessed a confidence that seemed to emanate from her very soul. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece, vintage Valentino ivory silk that flowed like water, with delicate beadwork that caught the light as she moved. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant chignon, adorned with her grandmother's pearl combs, a gift from the family that had embraced her completely, but it was the glow on her face that made her truly radiant. "You're glowing," said Maya, her maid of honor and closest friend since childhood. "I mean, literally glowing. It's like you're lit from within." Naomi smiled, one hand unconsciously moving to rest on her still flat stomach. The secret she and Alexander had been keeping for 6 weeks now felt like sunshine trapped inside her chest. "Must be the happiness," she said, though her eyes held a deeper joy that she wasn't quite ready to share with the world. Through the window, she could see Alexander by the altar, a structure of white marble and cascading flowers that overlooked Lake Michigan. Even from a distance, his presence commanded attention. At 43, he was more distinguished than ever, silver threading through his dark hair, laugh lines speaking of 2 years of genuine happiness. His morning coat was perfectly tailored, but it was the way he kept checking his watch, eager to see his bride, that made Naomi's heart flutter. "Mrs. Drake," a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "There's someone here to see you." Naomi turned to find her assistant, the same woman who'd taken her place at Hartwell and Associates 3 years ago, standing in the doorway with an unexpected visitor. Donovan from litigation stood awkwardly in the hallway, clearly unsure if he belonged at such an elegant event. "Donovan!" Naomi moved toward him with genuine warmth. "I'm so glad you came." "I almost didn't," he admitted, looking around at the opulent surroundings. "This is quite different from the office." Naomi laughed, the sound like music. "It's still just me, though I admit the venue has improved significantly." "I wanted to thank you," Donovan said suddenly. "After everything happened at Hartwell, after the firm collapsed, you made sure all of us landed somewhere good. Even though we didn't. We weren't—" "You weren't what?" Naomi asked gently. "We weren't brave enough to stand up for you when it mattered," he finished, shame coloring his voice. "But you still took care of us." It was true. After Hartwell and Associates had filed for bankruptcy, Naomi had personally reached out to every decent employee, using her connections to place them in better positions at thriving firms. She'd even written recommendation letters that had transformed careers. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Naomi said simply. Besides, Catherine was the problem, not the people caught in her wake. "Speaking of Catherine," Donovan hesitated. "I heard she applied for a position at Morrison Group's Chicago office last month." Naomi's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Did she?" "The application was rejected before it reached the interview stage. Apparently, there's a comprehensive file on her management style that follows her everywhere now." "How unfortunate for her," Naomi said, though her tone suggested she felt no actual sympathy. Some lessons needed to be permanent. "Mrs. Drake?" Her assistant appeared again. "It's time." Maya handed Naomi her bouquet, white roses and baby's breath, simple and elegant, and they began the procession to the gardens. As they walked, Naomi thought about the journey that had brought her here. 3 years ago, she'd been a woman hiding her true self, living half a life to protect a secret marriage. The cruelty she'd endured had forced her to choose, surrender or fight for the love she deserved. She'd chosen to fight. And she'd won everything. The wedding march began, and Naomi stepped onto the petal-strewn aisle. 300 guests rose to their feet, but she only had eyes for Alexander. He stood at the altar with tears in his eyes, watching his wife walk toward him for the second time, with the wonder of someone witnessing a miracle. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, and the rest of the world disappeared. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not so bad yourself," she whispered back, their private joke making them both smile. The ceremony was perfect, heartfelt vows that spoke of partnership, equality, and unshakable love. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, again and forever, Alexander's kiss was soft, reverent, filled with the promise of decades yet to come. But it was during the reception, as they danced their first dance to the same song that had played during their secret courthouse wedding, that Naomi decided to give Alexander his real gift. "I have something for you," she said, as they swayed together under stars and chandeliers. "Another surprise. I think my heart can't take much more happiness." Naomi reached into her small beaded purse and withdrew a tiny wrapped box. Alexander's brow furrowed in confusion. They'd already exchanged rings, already pledged their futures. "Open it," she said softly. Inside the box was a pair of tiny diamond earrings, so small they could only fit one person. Alexander stared at them for a long moment, his brilliant mind processing what they meant. When understanding dawned, his face transformed with joy so profound it took Naomi's breath away. "Really?" he whispered. "Really?" she confirmed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "About 7.5 months from now, you're going to be a father." Alexander's laugh was pure euphoria. He spun her around right there on the dance floor, both of them crying and laughing and completely oblivious to the 300 guests watching their private moment of perfect joy. "I love you," he said when he set her down, his forehead resting against hers. "I love you and our baby, and this incredible life we've built together." "I love you too," Naomi replied, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Always and forever. As the evening progressed, their guests celebrated not just a wedding, but a love story that had overcome every obstacle. There were toasts that brought tears, dancing that lasted until dawn, and moments of pure magic that would be remembered for generations. But years later, when people spoke of the Drake wedding, they always came back to the same moment. Naomi and Alexander on the dance floor, holding each other close, whispering secrets that made them laugh like children discovering treasure, because in the end, that's what they'd found in each other. Treasure beyond measure, love that conquered all, and a future bright enough to illuminate the world. 10 years later, Naomi and Alexander Drake would be known as Chicago's most powerful business couple, philanthropists who transformed education and healthcare across the city. Their children, 3 daughters and 1 son, would grow up knowing they were loved unconditionally and capable of achieving anything. But on this perfect night, surrounded by stars and roses and the endless promise of tomorrow, they were simply a man and woman who had fought for love and won. Some stories end with happily ever after. This one ends with happily ever always. The end. Your participation means so much. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have made the same choice Naomi did? What would you have done in her place? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.